On 30th December 2025, Maure and Prom, a French oil and gas company, agreed to sell its entire 20.07% equity stake in Seplat Energy to Hess Energies Limited for $496 million, implying an equity valuation of $2.5 billion. It solidified Seplat Energy's position as one of the most valuable indigenous energy companies in Africa. This deal crystallized nearly 2 decades of company building by a geologist and a surgeon who built Seplat from the ground up in 2009. Seplat was founded in 2009 by Ambrosi Bryant Chukwuemeka Ojiako, a practicing surgeon, and Austin Avuru, a geologist. Together, they built an indigenous oil and gas company to acquire and operate divested assets from international oil companies in Nigeria. From that founding thesis, Seplat evolved from a startup acquiring marginal onshore assets into a dual-listed Nigerian independent oil company valued at approximately $2.5 billion by the end of 2025. In this video, we talk about the journey, the transactions, and the events that made Seplat one of the biggest indigenous oil and gas companies in Nigeria and Africa at large. The players. The surgeon, Dr. ABC Ojiako. ABC Ojiako began his career as an orthopedic surgeon. He graduated medical school in 1985. Throughout the 1990s, Ojiako practiced medicine but still dabbled into commerce, inspired by a family business background and a keen eye for opportunities. His entrepreneurial drive eventually led him into the oil industry. He founded several energy and trading ventures, from Abe Court Trading to Zebra Energy, and in 2004 he set up Sheba Exploration and Production Company, Sepcol, an indigenous oil firm. Ojiako later reflected that surgery had trained him to leave no room for errors and instilled in him qualities of discipline, organization, and decisive decision-making that proved invaluable in business. By the late 2000s, the surgeon-turned-businessman was determined to make a mark in the Nigeria's upstream oil sector. He foresaw that international oil companies, IOCs, would soon shed some onshore assets due to unrest and a push for local participation, and he positioned himself to seize those opportunities when they arose. The geologist, Austin Avuru. Around the same time, Austin Avuru was also positioning. He's a geologist who had spent 12 years at the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation (NNPC) starting in 1980. After leaving NNPC in the early 1990s, Avuru worked in the private sector, and in 2002, he co-founded Platform Petroleum, a small indigenous oil company. In 2009, fate and business sense brought Ojiako and Avuru together. According to accounts, Shell was looking to sell some of its onshore oil blocks in the Niger Delta, and a mutual contact suggested that Avuru's Platform Petroleum team up with Ojiako's Sheba E&P to bid for these assets. Avuru later admitted he had never met Ojiako before and was initially cautious about the flamboyant surgeon entrepreneur, but he recognized the potential synergy in combining their strengths. The two agreed to partner, and when it came time to name their joint venture, they simply combined the names of their company, Sepcol plus Platform, to form Seplat. In June 2009, Seplat Petroleum Development Company was officially incorporated as a 50-50 partnership between Ojiako's Sheba and Avuru's Platform. Ojiako's credibility and track record soon helped attract major investors to the nascent firm. In December 2009, the French oil company Maure and Prom (M&P) acquired a 45% equity stake in Seplat, injecting crucial capital ahead of the young venture's first big deal. This backing by a reputable foreign partner allowed Seplat to acquire assets purchased that would have been out of reach otherwise, acquiring Shell's assets. Seplat's first defining moment came in July 2010, barely a year after its formation. Ojiako and Avuru positioned Seplat to purchase a package of 3 onshore oil leases being divested by Shell. In a landmark deal, Seplat acquired a 45% working interest in oil mining leases 4, 38, and 41 in Nigeria's Niger Delta. This asset had been jointly owned by Shell, Total, and Eni. By taking over as operator of the blocks, Seplat instantly transformed into an oil producer. The company reportedly managed to finance the acquisition using external debt and investor fund, such that it paid no upfront equity from its own pocket, a virtually unprecedented feat for an upstart firm. The Shell asset purchase completed without any major hitches. Immediately, it made Seplat about 60,000 barrels per day of gross operated oil production from the trail fields. These bold moves, an indigenous startup taking over prime onshore leases from a super major, was virtually unprecedented at the time. It positioned Seplat as a trailblazer in Nigeria's drive for local participation in upstream oil and proved that Nigerian companies could step into the shoes of multinationals on home turf. Avuru took the helm as Seplat CEO in 2010 while Orjiako assumed the role of chairman, and together they began scaling up the business. Within a few years, Seplat had ramped up output from those fields and established a reputation for efficient operations, rapid growth, and milestones. With the 3 acquired shale blocks forming its production base, Seplat spent the early 2010s ramping up output and solidifying its financial position. The company's success was clearly evident by April 2014 when Seplat achieved a historic first. It became the first Nigerian company to dual list its shares on both London Stock Exchange and Nigerian Stock Exchange. The initial public offering raised around $500 million in new equity, valuing Seplat at about $1.9 billion. This infusion of capital allowed Seplat to pay down debt and position the firm for further asset acquisitions. The dual listing was a source of pride that showcased Seplat's transparency and global ambition, and it underscored investor confidence in the company's model. By this time, Seplat was producing on the order of 60,000 barrels of oil per day from its 3 Niger Delta blocks, and had proven that a Nigerian operator could efficiently run former shale fields while meeting high standards of governance. The company's story was held up as a model for indigenous capacity building in an industry long dominated by multinationals. Avuru as CEO became one of Nigeria's most respected oil executives, while Orjiako as chairman used his clout and strategic vision to guide expansion. But Seplat did not rest on its laurels. The company set its sights on acquiring more oil and gas assets to grow its reserves and production base. Expansion via acquisitions. Seplat's growth strategy in the mid-2010s centered on acquiring additional assets being divested by IOCs or other independents. From 2015 to 2022, they acquired many key assets from IOCs. In February 2015, Seplat announced a deal with Chevron to acquire a 40% working interest in OML 53 and an effective 22.5% interest in OML 55. These blocks fit Seplat's strategy of boosting onshore oil production and expanding its natural gas resources. However, the acquisitions were not without drama. A rival bidder, Britannia U, sued to block the sales, leading to protracted litigation that delayed the asset transfer. The dispute went all the way to Nigeria's Supreme Court, which in January 2016 ruled in favor of Seplat and Chevron and cleared the way for Seplat to finally assume ownership and operatorship of OML 53 and 55. Once resolved, the payoff was significant. Seplat's CEO noted that OML 53 and 55 together held an estimated 200 million barrels of oil equivalent in net recoverable reserve for Seplat, a major volume that was now unlocked for the company's growth. OML 53 also included the large Ohaji South gas and condensate field, earmarked for Seplat's domestic gas expansion plans. Seplat went on to form a joint venture with NNPC to commercialize gas from OML 53, the Anor Gas Processing Company. This underscored Seplat's role in Nigeria's gas-to-power ambitions. Seplat today supplies roughly 30% of gas used by Nigeria's gas-fired electricity generators. In October 2019, Seplat announced an agreement to buy Eland Oil and Gas plc, an independent producer listed on London's AIM market, for about £382 million, approximately $480 million. The takeover was completed in December 2019. Eland's primary asset was 45% interest in OML 40, an onshore Niger Delta block producing around 8,000 barrels per day, along with an interest in undeveloped Obima field. This deal was a landmark on multiple fronts. Seplat became the first Nigerian company to acquire a publicly listed foreign oil company. Not long after this expansion, the company also saw a transition in leadership. After a successful decade at the helm, Austin Avuru retired as CEO in July 2020 and handed the reins to Roger Brown, a Briton who had been Seplat's CFO. Though Avuru remained on the board as a non-executive, Dr. Orjiako continued as chairman, guiding the company's strategy and stakeholder relationship as Seplat geared up for its next big chapter. The ExxonMobil saga, Seplat's ambitious $1.3 billion gamble. In early 2022, Seplat embarked on its most ambitious move yet, a deal to acquire Nigerian assets of oil major ExxonMobil. This transaction would become a roller coaster saga of corporate, regulatory, and political hurdles. The saga would span 2.5 years before reaching a resolution. On 25th February 2022, Seplat announced it had agreed to purchase ExxonMobil's entire share capital in Mobil Producing Nigeria Unlimited (MPNU), the US company's local subsidiary, for $1.3 billion in cash plus up to $300 million in contingent payments. This was a transformational deal for Seplat. Through MPNU, Seplat would acquire Exxon's 40% operating interest in 4 shallow water oil licenses in the Niger Delta, which are joint ventures with NNPC. These fields were long established, high-producing assets, including major reservoirs like Kwaibo. If completed, the acquisition would double Seplat's oil production, adding around 95,000 barrels per day of output and significant gas volumes, and to nearly quadruple Seplat's reserves. Seplat's board touted the move as transformational, and investors initially cheered the bold expansion. However, the ink was barely dry on the agreement when headwinds hit. Almost immediately, the state-owned NNPC, now a limited liability corporation called NNPC Limited, signaled it was not on board with Exxon selling these assets to Seplat. NNPC's management asserted that under the joint operating agreement for ExxonMobil JV, NNPC had a contractual right of first refusal on any sale, implying NNPC could block Exxon's deal with Seplat by choosing to take over the asset itself. Seplat countered that what it was buying were shares in Exxon's subsidiary MPNU rather than the underlying oil licenses directly, a legal nuance intended to bypass partner preemption rights. Despite this distinction, it was clear that NNPC was uncomfortable with losing such high-quality shallow water fields to a private company and preferred to keep them. By March 2022, the deal hit a major roadblock. Nigeria's upstream petroleum regulator, the NUPRC, officially refused to grant the ministerial consent needed for ExxonMobil Seplat transaction, citing overriding national interest and a procedural concern. By law, any assignment of oil licenses or major change of control in an oil leaseholder requires approval from the Minister of Petroleum. Without ministerial consent, the deal could not close. To make matters worse, NNPC in July 2022 obtained a court injunction restraining ExxonMobil from selling its Nigerian subsidiary to any third party, further entangling the proposed acquisition in legal knots. By mid-2022, Seplat's dream deal has entered a state of limbo, pending appeals or political breakthrough. In an unexpected twist, President Muhammadu Buhari, who at the time was also serving as Nigeria's de facto petroleum minister, appeared to overrule the regulators a few weeks later. On August 8, 2022, Buhari gave his official consent as minister to Seplat's purchase of Exxon's Nigerian assets, catching industry observers by surprise and seemingly putting the weight of the presidency behind Seplat. Seplat and its shareholders rejoiced at its green light from the highest authority. It briefly seemed the monumental deal might go through after all. However, the celebration was short-lived. Almost immediately, the petroleum regulator NUPRC publicly insisted that it had not approved the transaction and that it is still considered the sale invalid. The situation grew chaotic, highlighting a power tussle between the presidency and the regulatory bureaucracy. In a stunning reversal, just 3 days later, August 11, 2022, President Buhari walked back his approval. His spokesperson announced that Buhari has decided to allow the regulator to do their job and was withholding the earlier consent pending when all necessary procedures are complete. Essentially, Nigeria's president rescinded its own go-ahead under pressure, underscoring a lack of alignment among the country's authorities. This very public confusion cast doubt on Nigeria's policy coherence in the eyes of investors. Seplat, for its part, maintained it still wanted to complete the acquisition and will work with all stakeholders to address the concerns. Through late 2022 and all of 2023, the ExxonMobil asset sale remained stalled. The outgoing Buhari administration never revisited the final consent issue before its term ended in May 2023. and the dispute with NNPC over its right of first refusal remained unresolved in the courts. Seplat had to twice extend the timeline agreed with ExxonMobil for closing the transaction, even sweetening the deal with revised terms, reportedly allowing ExxonMobil to receive certain operational cash flows while waiting for approvals. The prolonged uncertainty weighed on Seplat's stock and tested the patience of its management and investors. During this period, Seplat also navigated other challenges. In early 2023, its CEO, Roger Brown, was temporarily restrained by a court from working in Nigeria due to a personal immigration technicality, a matter later resolved in Brown's favor. And Dr. Ojiako, the founding chairman, had to step down from the board in 2022 amid some corporate governance disputes. Notably, Ojiako's last major act as Seplat's chairman was helping announce the Exxon deal in early 2022, a capstone move that he then had to watch from the sidelines as the drama unfolded. Despite the rough waters, Seplat's core business continued to churn out oil and gas, and the company repeatedly affirmed its commitment to see Exxon transaction through. The stalemate finally broke after a change in Nigeria's leadership. In May 2023, a new president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, took office and his administration moved swiftly to resolve various investor-unfriendly logjams, including Seplat Exxon saga. By August 2024, Nigerian regulators indicated they were ready to formally consent to ExxonMobil's sale of MPNU to Seplat, after an agreement was reached with NNPC to withdraw its objections. A few weeks later, all regulatory conditions were satisfied. In October 2024, nearly 2.5 years after the deal was first unveiled, Nigeria's government granted the long-awaited ministerial consent for Seplat's acquisition of ExxonMobil's shallow water assets. By early 2025, Seplat announced it had completed the takeover of Exxon's MPNU units, integrating those producing fields and the Kwaibo export terminal into its operations. The deal of the decade for Seplat had tested the company's patience and resilience, but ultimately it demonstrated Seplat's determination and ability to play in the big leagues of oil industry. The episode also highlighted changing dynamics in Nigeria's oil sector, as indigenous players like Seplat and others such as Tony Elumelu's Oil and Gas step up to acquire assets the IOCs were divesting. A new era. This recent development marked a new chapter in Seplat's story. By 2025, the French firm Maure & Prom, which had been a key shareholder in Seplat since 2009, decided to exit the position as part of a broader strategic refocus away from Nigeria. In a landmark deal announced in December 2025, Nigerian Tony Elumelu, via his company Heirs Holding Limited, agreed to acquire Maure & Prom's entire 20.07% stake in Seplat for roughly $496 million. It instantly made Heirs Holding the single largest shareholder in Seplat, demonstrating a major vote of confidence by an influential African investor. Elumelu's investment also highlights a broader trend of African capital playing a bigger role in Africa's resources. As he noted, the deal reflects our strong belief in Africa's ability to own, develop, and responsibly manage its strategic resources. Thanks for watching this episode, and I hope you do like, share, and subscribe.